My name is Amanda Catterall, and I'm a teacher who loves math. And when I hear students and adults say that math is hard or they don't enjoy it, it makes me just feel discouraged. Something I've noticed in the past with my students is that geometry is hard for them, which it's interesting because children are learning about shapes from such a young age with all the different shape books in libraries and in our classrooms. So today I'm excited to show you a rubric that was shared with me by Julie Nurnberger Haig, who created this rubric, and it's really helped me to make better choices about what to use with my students and how to use these books. To show you how to use this rubric, I'm going to use the book When a Line Bends, a Shape Begins by Rhonda Gallagher. And for copyright reasons, I'm not going to show the actual book. However, it is very easily accessible through the internet or at a local library, and it's something that you might already own. To start off, a lot of teachers and libraries enjoy this book because it's colorful, engaging pictures, and it has interesting rhymes, which we know improves literacy skills. But the point of the book is to teach about shapes. So let's look at the math today. Right now, if you haven't already read through the rubric on your own, I encourage you to pause the video and do so. So, using the traffic light rating scale, we will be able to tell if this book is a red, yellow, green, or super green book. It is helpful to use some colored pens or even the colored markers that you have in your classroom from your students. But our first step is to decide what path to take with this rating scale. I will be showing you how to use the full traffic light rating system right here. But you may also choose to take a little bit less time and just get rid of your inaccurate books and then look for those green and super green books down here by only using completely accurate books. So, yeah, let's get started. The first page of this traffic light rating scale is just an overview of directions and how you would then use the books after rating them in your classroom with your students. So that is all explained here. And again, if you've read this over, you would know a little bit more about what this first page says. Starting off with our book here on the first step of this rubric is to look for red qualities. I encourage you to start with the misleading pictures portion of this no sign because the first checkbox right here is the most common problem. So if you are just trying to eliminate the red books, this is something that could decrease time and definitely make it easier to check off that one box and move on to a new book. Starting with our first page that starts talking about shapes in When a Line Bends, a Shape Begins, it's our square page. So labels pictures of real objects or three-dimensional shapes as the 2D shape name. So here for square, it says a square is four sides all the same. The boxes of a hopscotch game, a patch to cover up your knee, a present sent from you to me. Out of the items labeled as squares here, we have some problematic things. So a patch to cover up your knee. Although it is very thin, there's still dimension to it. So it's a 3D object labeled as a square. And then for a present sent from you to me, that is a cube or even a rectangular prism, depending on what it looks like. And even here, it doesn't look like the sides are of equal width. But then we go over to the boxes of a hopscotch game. So here it is just the outline of a square. So that is a positive part of this book. However, because it said and labeled a present and a patch as a square, we would check this off already from just one shape as inaccurate and a misleading picture. So then, as I go through this, I'm going to go in the order of what's on this page here. So I might be flipping around in the book a little bit. So treats a diamond as a geometric shape. If we turn to, as we look through the book, there's an entire page dedicated to a diamond, and a diamond is not a geometric shape. So already there is another one of our inaccurate properties and misleading pictures. Moving on to just going through the geometric shapes. So in this book, those are rectangle, triangle, square, and octagon. Shows only one image for any shape name. So if we look through and find go to the octagon page, we'll see that it is only showing a regular octagon. Anytime that, the one time that an octagon comes up, it is only a regular octagon, and there are no other examples of an octagon that I'm seeing on this page. Our next checkbox, images labeled as triangles are only equilateral or acute isosceles. If we flip over to the triangle page, that is not the case. So something that I had to think about and interpret on my own while using this was whether or not to count a 3D object as a 2D shape here. So what I mean by that is the bird's beak is made up of two right scaling triangles. Although it's labeling a 3D object as a 2D object, I decided that I would still count this as a right scaling triangle instead of just equilateral or acute isosceles, because there was an attempt there to show more than just the equilateral and acute isosceles. Moving on to corners or sides of shapes labeled as triangle, rectangle, or other polygon are open or curved. If we turn again, we'll stay on the triangle page. You can see that there is a musical triangle there, and the corners here are curved, and one corner is even open. We know that this is wrong because polygons must have straight sides and closed sides. So this, just from that one musical triangle, is a red quality. And then moving on to if n-gons are named, so our n-gon that is named in here is an octagon. And the image here, it is a regular octagon, so it's only showing an image with all sides the same length. So again, we would check this one off here. Going over to inaccurate properties. So says a rectangle has two sides longer than the others. Flipping over to rectangles, it says a rectangle is like a square with something rearranged. Two sides are long and two are short. So it's already stating right there that it is two sides longer than the others. Now in this book, we see there are parallelograms and rhombuses. However, since it's not named in the story, we're not going to check anything off for that box. We're just going to leave it blank. The n-gons described as having all sides the same length. Flipping over to our octagon page. An octagon has many sides. All counted, there are 8. You see it at the corner. It tells cars to wait. So it does not describe them as having all sides the same length. So So we are going to just leave that blank. Moving on to the next page of our rubric, we're going to start off by looking at yellow and green qualities. And our first thing is orientation. So a lot of books are only going to show these shapes in horizontal orientation. And some students might get confused that any of those shapes have to be horizontal or it's no longer that shape. So in this book particularly, we can start over at the squares and look at the images, and I'm seeing that while some of the shapes that they're labeling as squares, like the present, although it is 3D, it is horizontal. However, looking over at the hopscotch, it's oriented so that the square is no longer horizontal. So this would fall into some of the images of the shape are horizontal and some are not horizontal. So I'm going to write square right here. And then I'm looking now at the rectangle page, and here I'm seeing a lot of rectangles that are horizontal, but also the envelope that the mailman is carrying here is slightly turned and is not horizontal, so I'm going to write rectangle here also. Coming over to triangles, all of the images I see are horizontal. All of the bases are all horizontal. So I am going to write triangle here as yellow. Moving on to octagon. And again, I'm not evaluating oval and heart and star because those are not geometric shapes. So the only geometric shapes, again, in this book are triangle, octagon, square, and rectangle. So here, the only image of an octagon is a horizontal octagon. So I'm going to put that in yellow. Moving on down to properties that all polygons share. So it's stating the numbers of sides or angles, or encouraging the reader and your students to talk about how many sides, vertices, corners, and angles the shape has. So I'm going to flip through and let's look at square first. So a square is 4 sides all the same. So a square is telling us the number of sides. So I'm going to write that there. Now as I read through, I'm not seeing that number of angles or number of vertices is mentioned. So I'm not going to put square anywhere else. And since this is brought up, I'm going to color this in green. Looking at rectangle, a rectangle is like a square with something rearranged. 2 sides are long and 2 are short. The 4 sides now are changed. So again, it brings up the sides here for rectangle. Moving on to the triangle, and the first thing it says is that a triangle has 3 sides, but something different here. It says 3 corners too, if you keep reading. So I'm going to include that with number of angles and color in that positive quality. And our last shape we need to look at is octagon. I forgot to write triangle. My apologies. And looking at the octagon, it states how many sides there are, but nothing about the angles or the vertices. Now our next task is to think about whether or not the book is showing the correct properties of 2D shapes that are flat and closed. However, in this book, from what I've seen, there's nowhere in the story that tells the reader the names of the shapes and that they are 2D or flat, or that the shapes have to be closed to be considered a polygon that's two-dimensional. Well, a two-dimensional polygon. So we, again, are just going to leave this blank since there's nothing for it. I realized I did accidentally skip something up here, as there is a plus mark to look over. If an image of a square is shown oriented 45 degrees from horizontal like this. Now, and the word square labels the picture. So let's go back to square. And here on our square page, it does label all of these images as square, and the hopscotch game it does exactly look 45 degrees from horizontal, so I'm going to color that one in too. It always makes me happy when you find some positive qualities about these books, because it can be discouraging looking through these and finding such negative qualities and misleading things that we're teaching our kiddos, that we're teaching our students. Moving on to our next page. So here we are going to bubble in our negatives and positives with our markers. And on this page, again, I'm just going to go through as the rubric says. So for triangle, well, I'm going to flip over to that triangle page, and the bird's beak is a right scaling triangle. So it does not only show isosceles or equilateral, and it does not show only acute triangles, so I'm actually able to color in more green. A square, we would not color in this first one, 4 sides or 4 angles, only property stated, because it says that all sides must be the same length in our story. So we can even go down here. It says all sides the same length, and I'm going to color that one in green. And then fails to say right angles necessary. It does not mention right angles on our square page, so I'm going to color that one in yellow. It does not mention right angles, or that opposite sides are parallel. So again, we're just going to leave those blank. Moving down to rectangle. This book does claim that opposite sides are the same length, but implies not adjacent sides are. So we're going to color that one in yellow. And it does fail to say that right angles are necessary. For the rest of this, 4 sides or 4 angles, only property stated. Even though it's inaccurate saying that 2 sides are long and 2 sides are short, it does mention something about length, so we can't color that one in, that it only mentions those 2 properties. It doesn't mention, again, anything about right angles, parallel sides, or that opposite sides are the same length. Looking over at the column that says what variety do the pictures of each shape show. In this book, we are only seeing oblong rectangles. Moving on to our n-gons, because again, we're not going to evaluate rhombus, parallelogram, trapezoid, or kite because it was not named in our story. So we're just going to move on and leave those blank. And then n-gons, so we have an octagon talked about in this story. So I'm going to write our octagon right here. And it does avoid saying that all sides are the same length. It does not bring this up. So I will go ahead and color this one in green. over in the variety of pictures. So it is only showing a regular octagon, as it only shows one image. And this image is also only a convex octagon. Looking at our circle, so this story does not mention that for a circle the edge is a fixed distance from the center. So we again are just going to leave this blank. And this last plus sign down here, if the book said any other accurate properties of the shape, so this book, everything that is accurate has already been covered in previous boxes above. I realized that when I went through this rubric, I completely skipped over the shapes that were not discussed in the book: rhombus, parallelogram, trapezoid, kite. Instead of just circling the not applicable, which is right underneath, and then I again did this. Now, the next page of our rubric is looking for super green qualities. However, this book doesn't have any super green qualities. As you look through, it doesn't say or show non-examples, and it doesn't talk about 2D and 3D shapes and what the relationship is between those. So we are actually just going to move that one over, and we're not going to do anything we're not going to use that page. So our last page, we are going to decide how this book taught each two-dimensional shape here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look back at that original no sign that we did at the beginning. And first, let's look at triangles. So for triangles, I'm going to look back and I'm going to check out that first one in misleading pictures again. Labels pictures of real objects or three-dimensional shapes with 2D shape names. And looking back, remember the bird's beak, that is a 3D shape that they're labeling as a triangle. And a white sail is not a 2D shape. We are going to circle that red. And then next, square. So again, I'm looking back, and already the first checkbox in misleading pictures shows me that this is a red quality book for this shape. So I'm going to go ahead and circle. So I'm going to go ahead and circle red here. For rectangles, so again, that first checkbox on our no sign is showing, is labeling 3D objects as rectangles. But let's even look at some of the other checkboxes. In inaccurate properties, says a rectangle has two sides longer than the others. So there are multiple ones for rectangles that are teaching as this is a red book. And we're going to skip rhombus, parallelogram, trapezoid, and kite. And then we're going to go down to our polygons and write in octagon again. Looking at our red no sign for octagon, I'm looking down at if n-gons are named, the images only show all sides the same length. And we check that off, so octagon and n-gons are going to be circled red also. There are many other checkboxes in there for octagon that would have made this red. Again, that stop sign is a 3D object. And going on to our last one for quality of book for teaching circles. So for this, it again goes back to the real objects being labeled as circles even though they're 3D. So in the story, it was brought up that a blue marble was a circle, and we know that that is actually a sphere. So that is red. And then I again did this at the very end when we were evaluating the book for each shape. So I am going to go ahead and now circle not applicable for those 4 shapes that were not brought up in the story. I just wanted to go back and bring up our first page we talked about as we did. Now again, looking at this, you have so many options and of how you could use this rubric for your classroom and helping you know what to use and how to use these books with your students in your classroom. So again, what I showed you was the full traffic light rating system, and you can use this solely to get rid of your inaccurate books up here, and then down here you can look for your green lights. So I encourage you to use this rubric and really think about what you're using with your students, because you make an impact, and it's very important that we're teaching them as accurately and as informed as we can. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to learn how to use this rubric to evaluate your own shape books. If you found this video on YouTube, you can find more information at the Ohio Journal of School Mathematics at the link provided.